So yeah, what's new in your life? Been a couple weeks since we did one of these.
Is it?
Yeah.
Was Josh the last one?
I think so.
Wow.
See, we were supposed to do the Super Bowl one.
Right.
But because we're flexible with our plan. So I think it's just as good now time as any to welcome everyone to the Video Reformation Podcast. I'm Ben.
I'm Justin.
We're the co-founders of Storyboard Media, and this week we are the Sacagaweas to your Lewis and Clark in your quest for westward video expansion. It's a manifest
the
destiny
frontier
kind
of
of thing.
video.
Yes. Just straight to the Pacific, as we just teased, but we don't really ever know how much of our intro banter ends up in the episode.
Yeah, what are we talking about?
Today we are talking about how to be flexible with your strategy. Before we jump in, though, it is unfortunately time for another sponsor. We just can't seem to hold on to a sponsor for more than one episode at a time, which is interesting because now we've actually been contacted by a couple of places to legitimately sponsor our podcast, and we're not sure how to marry that with our really enjoyable fake I don't know
previous
podcast sponsors.
Yeah, well, that's...
If somebody puts money in front of us, we'll figure it out. So what's our sponsor's name this week?
This week is Pillsbury Pregnancy Program for Men.
Tee-hee.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's the doughboy. So for those of you who aren't following us on Instagram Live, Justin just reached across the table to try to poke my belly.
Yeah, it didn't reach.
Didn't quite get there.
I have long arms.
I tee-heed
Ben has
anyway.
a belly, and it still didn't connect.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm very interested to hear the Pillsbury Pregnancy Program for Men's spot later on in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
That's really happy to have him along. I think it's also a time for us to mention, again, before we dive into the premise of this episode, which is about flexibility within strategic plans, that we can certainly keep coming up with episode topics and, in fact, have no problem doing that, but we're making a lot of assumptions that our audience wants to hear what it is we want to talk about. And so, to you, our listening audience, yes, you.
David and
Patrick and Hamed.
And
that's pretty much all I know.
Yeah.
There's that guy that we talked to that one time on the phone.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, for the four of you. Oh, and Karen.
My mom.
Yeah. And apparently my mom occasionally.
I'm pretty sure they download it. Oh no, your mom listened to it.
My mom called me out
on the sponsor.
My mom called me out on my dad only saying he was proud of me 3 times. Just a random text.
Well, that's not your fault.
No, it's not
Unless
my fault.
Unless you didn't do things to impress your father.
Don't bring that up. Anyway, so I would encourage all of our listeners to, however you want to communicate with us, let us know what you'd like to hear us talk about. We're all about providing value and having our listeners learn. And if we're talking about stuff that isn't relevant to you, then what's the point of this whole thing? So a whole lot of ways to do that. I think probably most of the people who listen know how to reach us by text. Ben at storyboardmedia.co or Justin at storyboardmedia.co. Great opportunity to, put a comment in on a social channel or, hell, put it in on a rating. They haven't answered my question on so-and-so
Send us a letter. I'll take anything.
Yeah. Ooh, a letter would be nice. A handwritten note.
Yeah.
That would be great. Anyway, so just want to get that out there. You tell us what you want us to talk about. So, to today's topic. We talk an awful lot about strategy. Mm-hmm. For anybody who's listened to the 7 Phases episodes or seen our 7 Phases post page, whatever we have.
Well, it may even be important to mention we did, the 7 phases, right? Mm. We did 2 episodes discussing the 7 phases.
Yep.
The entire first episode
was about
strategy. The second episode was about 2
everything
through
else.
7.
Yes.
So that's how the importance which we place upon strategy. So go on with it.
So we talk about it a lot, but I think strategy is still one of those terms that kind of polarizes people because either they don't, they think that you're just using it as a buzzword, but also I think a lot of it honestly comes down to I don't know if it's an introvert extrovert thing, but there are planners and there are doers. Mm-hmm. And a lot of planners put all of their energy into creating the plan and then hope to God someone else can go take it and execute it. Whereas the other side of that coin is a lot of doers don't really care what the plan is, but as soon as they're given one, they're going to go and execute it. They don't care why you put it together. So I think it makes sense that a lot of people are just kind of polarized by the idea of strategy. But I think a lot of what people get into is, well, if you spend all of this time and all of this energy putting a plan together, what happens when something changes?
Sure.
Like, do you follow it like gospel? And what we're going to talk about today is how can you be flexible within that plan?
With growth stage companies or growing companies of any sort, companies who are going to implement a year's worth of video or even a video, stuff's going to change, right? Video doesn't happen in a day. Like, I guess some of it can, actually. Yeah. Some of it can happen in 2 minutes. But when you have a strategy that's usually looking at a long-term thing, strategies are for long-term planning.
Yep.
Crazy shit happens in the startup world and the growth world.
And I did just see one of my notes here, too, that I just added in the last hour or so. But I think flexibility within plans is something that, like, people at management level and, like, C-suite level, they get that, right? That's how they get to that level. But I think a lot of our listeners are kind of that middle level and even some of those lower in the hierarchy. I think the lower in the hierarchy you get, those are the people who are doing the more tactical stuff anyway.
Yep.
It's their job to write a blog post. It's their job to execute a PPC campaign.
Yeah.
Whatever it may be. And so they may be aware that there's a plan, but like for them, there's some comfort in every day coming to work knowing this is what I have to do. But, whether it's you or the people above you, there's got to be that kind of leeway in terms of, all right, well, shit hit the fan. What now? So I think I want to start by addressing like the haters of strategy, right? Who just say like, what's the point in even planning something out because stuff changes all the time.
Okay.
And I imagine this is one of those misattributed quotes, so, don't at me. But like, I think the Eisenhower quote is
Dalai Lama.
Yeah. Bill Murray once said, Dwight Eisenhower apparently once said, in preparing for battle, I have found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
That's not how he said it, though.
No. How did he say it?
Is it on here?
Yeah.
Everyone had to plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Mouth? Yeah. That surprise guest
Don't
this
tell
episode.
Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson is here. Hey, Mike. No? That was a no.
I heard he owns like tigers, or maybe I just saw it in The Hangover, but I'm not going to mess with Mike Tyson too much.
So,
I'm sure he's listening.
Yes. Big fan of the cast. So anyway, I've been intrigued for quite a while about, because I'm a planner, right? I'm one of those people who falls on the, like, let me play the chess game, let me figure out what all of our moves are, and then hand it off to someone to go actually do it.
Which has been great for us. I'm a doer. If you say we need to get across town, I will drive immediately and go light to light. I won't wait until all the lights are green and then go. Like, I'm just like, all right, let's get there and figure it out. Let's get there and figure it out.
I think I think that actually leads into another good metaphor, and maybe it's in our notes here somewhere later, but I think there's a Google Maps metaphor in here too. So the flexibility with the strategy is like, if you say, if I gave you that address, if we needed to get to Atlanta, and I dropped a pin for you, and you put it in Google Maps, and it would tell us how to get there. But as we're going, Google Maps is smart enough to recognize when there's traffic, when there are detours, when there are faster ways to go. So it doesn't just, you don't hit start on Google Maps
it's one way.
Stick to the exact same way. As you go along that journey, it tells you, hey, there's a faster route available. And that's kind of how I see a strategy. Put the plan in place, but then be aware of your surroundings, what's going on, so that you can adjust. Back to Eisenhower. To me, that speaks so much to the value in what you get when you actually go through and develop the strategy. In the strategy episode, which is what, episode 1? 2 of this episode 1, we talk about how like the first half of developing your own strategy, your own video roadmap, is kind of a look inward, right? It's that internal audit. What are our department's goals? What are our company's goals? What are my personal goals? Who is our audience?
What resources do I have?
What resources do we have? What channels do we have to use? What kind of budget do we have?
Constraints,
right? And when we do it for clients, we actually have this whole halftime report, which is here's what you told us.
Here's what all the people that as a stakeholder, here's what they've told us
about you, about your company, and here's where we've identified we can help you. So now we're going to go away and figure out how to put that plan together. Right. So the first ever strategic engagement we did with one of our video clients,
I think I know.
We went in and did like a full day workshop with their
marketing team,
marketing CMO and marketing managers, basically. Some of the data people weren't in there, but what was so valuable, or what was surprised me.
Well, it was the entire scope, because it had the people actually doing the things too, right?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Like some of the photographers and whatnot. Yeah.
So we were going through kind of this one day workshop to assess goals, revenue goals, marketing goals, developing personas. And one of the things that surprised me the most was that a company of that size had never really spent the time away from, we essentially locked them in the CMO's office for a day. Phones were off. We took like 2 breaks and a lunch break. They, and a lot of companies, had never really sat down to think about who are our personas. It kind of caught us off guard a little bit how much work we needed to do with them, because they had certain ideas of things, but when we tried to put it into the structure that we had developed, they needed to flesh those things out. And from a metaphor standpoint, we did have to be a little bit flexible in that workshop too, because we ended up realizing we needed to spend a lot more time on developing these things instead of just hearing them from them.
Yeah, the reason for that is not that anybody's necessarily doing anything wrong, but somebody gets hired in January, and that person gets told, here are our personas. And then somebody gets hired in June, but they're not really at that level, so they just have to assume and kind of work with what they think they know. And then in July, the CMO realizes, this audience is obsolete, and this one is our new market, but doesn't relay that information. So things keep rolling and rolling. Yeah. And if you don't take the time to actually ask these questions of yourselves, everyone's got a different idea of who you're talking to. So it's important just to do this, whether you're hiring somebody to help you or not. It's important to do.
Yeah. So the beauty of putting a strategy together is that these are our goals. This is what we're trying to accomplish. This is who we're trying to talk to.
Everyone on the team across the board knows it.
Yes. And so if there's a change in CMO, or a new unexpected acquisition happens and all of a sudden there's a new product or something like that, you've actually got this base information laid out. Everybody's all on the same page with it, and that makes it easier to then kind of pivot the direction that you need to go with that strategy.
The reason for our halftime is to say, all right, everybody, here's what we've heard. Is this correct? So that is their recipe, I guess, like the things that they need to know moving forward as a team. At that point, they could say, all right, get lost, guys, we're good.
Yeah.
We know what we're doing, or at least we know what our intentions are and what our constraints are. For us, then, at that point, we take off and see how can we solve these problems with video.
Right.
But just having that halftime report has a lot of value.
Yeah.
So however, whether it's us or anybody else doing this sort of thing, just taking the time to have somebody ask the right questions is important.
I think, main point there being that even if you're going to break from your roadmap, from your strategy, there's still so much value in having laid out the principal pieces so that you can adjust accordingly. All right. What about the Mike Tyson part of this? What about when you get punched in the face?
Give me some examples of what that might be. So if you're a growth stage B2B company, let's say...
Well, and I think that's a great example too, because it happens, we work with a lot of growth stage companies, and change happens constantly.
Always.
At startups and growth stage companies, week to week, fundamental initiatives may change. And so I think a lot of those companies also tend to be like, well, why are we going to put a plan in place? Because everything's always different.
Yeah.
Again,
we're just trying to glue this shit together.
Yes. Yeah. Well, let's let's glue it together and let's see what kind of popsicle stick house we can make. And then,
I think for me, one of the most important parts of a strategy session or understanding of what a strategy is the ability to prioritize.
Yes.
So we've got all this shit going on. What are our goals and how can I achieve that? Mm-hmm. And where do they rank within the the importance of the organization? So when things change, when a boss gets fired or a chief officer gets hired for a department.
Never had a CRO before. Now we got a chief revenue officer. Yeah.
You know how a chief officer can come in and say everything's different now.
True.
So that's sometimes that's their job.
Yeah.
But let's say you just got a new round of funding. So
thank you.
No, let's say our client got a new round of funding.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now you've got an extra $40 million to pump into this.
I am so out of here.
Usually it's going into sales and engineering, usually, if it's a tech company.
Yep.
But the rest of the company has to adapt with that. So what do we need to do? If we need salespeople or programs or whatever, we need to pump money into sales, whether that's tools or hiring or whatever it is, training.
I also think when they go straight to sales, it's because it's more closely directly connected to the revenue part, right? Mm-hmm. Because a salesperson closes a deal. And then
or opens a deal. Yeah.
Right. But they're the ones who close the deal that actually get the incoming wire transfer from a new customer or an existing customer for more. Yeah. Marketing is just that unfortunate one additional step away. But that sales team, if you're investing in the sales team, that sales team still needs to have leads. If you're growing a sales team, you've got to give them more inbound leads, right? Or more content to use in their outreach if it's cold outreach.
And if you're customer success, you're usually like the redheaded stepchild, it feels like, for a lot of organizations. And so they're stuck trying to figure out, all right, we have 200 new customers a month. How are we going to scale our operation with only one additional headcount? Mm-hmm. Like that's the beauty of video. I'm not sure that I can avoid saying that, but like being able to scale some of those things.
I think our bias is noted and everyone's aware of where we stand on the value of video. Generally pro video over
here. But generally speaking, things change often and quickly.
Yes. Well, and we've had clients who we get to... You'll hear the two sides of the same complaint from the sales department and the customer service or support department. You'll hear sales all of a sudden start to say things like, I'm beginning to get concerned that our customer support can deliver what I'm selling these people. Mm-hmm. And then you've got those customer support people saying, I'm beginning to be concerned that our salespeople are selling something that we can't execute.
Yep.
And with those customer support people, I put product development and those people in there too. Mm-hmm. And so often, marketing is then like made aware by, the product team. Hey, we're adding these new features. And so they start pushing out new features. The salespeople start selling those new features, and it hasn't gotten to where it's actually been developed to a point where the support people actually know how to support any of those new features. And so I don't know where I was going with that either, but it is something else that we have come across in terms of growth stage companies.
Another good example, we started working with maybe our second or third kind of strategic endeavor with a client. We started working with them right after a round of funding. So ideally, they were in a good place to kind of all right, let's regroup and set our path.
And if you're talking about who I think you're talking about, one of those 10-year overnight successes too.
Yes.
They've been around forever, but then all of a sudden, boom, they're exploding.
So tell me, describe that situation. What changed as that developed, as they went from, all right, we got 10 or 13 million, and then over the next 6 months, what happened?
So we had gone in and worked with the entire company to put together a video roadmap for their marketing department, their sales department, their customer success. We had even talked to HR and recruiting at that point, which isn't something that we lead with, but there were opportunities because they were hiring so many people, right? So we had laid out this company-wide video strategy that upon delivery date,
8 months ahead or whatever,
the day that we said this is the plan or presented the plan made perfect sense. And we had and we knew the budget that we were working with at that point too. So we even prioritized it into like 3 phases, right? Phase 1, this initial spend, here are the videos we're going to focus on.
Prioritizing.
Phase 2, here's what we need to do next, because that was kind of the like, let's prove ourselves with this initial tranche of money. You've got all of this money and are doing, so let's earmark some of it now. Here's what we're going to do with it. Yeah. And then phase C was like, and here's all the other stuff that we've identified. One of the key elements in phase 1 was this kind of sequence, and we've talked about these before, the kind of why, what, how sequence. And with them, at that time, they didn't have a clearly defined brand why, like the Simon Sinek why. In fact, I think our strategic concept even starts with not the Simon Sinek why,
right?
But it was going to be a series of videos for their distinctly different siloed personas that was going to use clients to say why I work with this company, why I use this platform. Yeah. And then we were going to dump it down into the next layer, which was like what this thing does. And then it was going to get to how this thing actually works, right? So that's kind of that key kind of top of funnel, and then starting to get into actual solutions, starting to go down the marketing part of the funnel. We decided to start with the actually like how it works content first.
Very demo based, right? Here's the technology. Here's the exact feature set that you would be interested in.
Which could also be part of this discussion, because while we were in production on that, the product department delivered a new version of the app, which caused all kinds of production problems. But so by the time we came back to the why videos, the CEO, actually the board, had spent some time really thinking about, as they were growing, they needed to like rein in their company culture. They needed everyone who worked there to come into work every day motivated by this kind of core guiding principle, right?
They wanted their team to work with a common purpose. They wanted to attract talent that had that purpose.
Yep.
And they wanted clients wwho understood that purpose.
Yes.
And it was perfect.
And in that process, they discovered their why,
right?
Their Simon Sinek why.
Yeah.
And so if we had just completely stuck to the plan, we could have just made those 3 videos for those 3 audiences that are testimonial style top of funnel stuff, like why I use this. But there was too good and I think it was fortunate too that we were able to work with the CEO on developing his presentation
to fit
of
the
that,
style of the why,
to the company, right?
Yep.
And so we were kind of like knee deep in this why message,
in a boardroom at 6
message.
o'clock at night.
Yeah. And so it was just hitting us over the head that we need to adjust and say, instead of making these 3, why I use those things, now we can actually say why we are a company. I think it would have been irresponsible and a disservice for us to have said, no, this is the plan. We've got to stick with this.
Right. Yeah, of course.
And that was, God, how many companies are lucky enough to have that kind of moment where they actually get to that kind of like fundamental, I have figured out how to position our company or our product or whatever it is.
That appeals to all shareholders, stakeholders,
Yeah. And so that was one where it was less of a like shit hit the fan kind of thing, but it was like, okay, this company is actually growing up in front of our eyes. They're starting to figure out these things, and we need to help them communicate that. And that
those are some of their most used videos at the moment. I just was talking to the sales guy.
Good. So, again, go back to the Google Maps metaphor. It's like we're on 85 South, and this whole new bypass around Greenville, South Carolina opens up or something while we're on our drive, and it's going to take 45 minutes
off your
off the drive to Atlanta. Well, then let's go that way. Just because we were supposed to go through Greenville or what, I'm extending the metaphor a bit much, but like, okay, this was the opportunity that was just handed to us.
There's always construction though in South Carolina.
That's true.
It's been
and,
there
and like up to
forever.
Charlotte. God, I feel like that's been going on for 20 years.
Yeah, but
China Grove?
China Grove, yeah.
China Grove!
Oh, Doobie Brothers. Cool.
All right. See, that's the kind of stuff that you get on Instagram Live that you don't get in the edit.
You may not get in the edit.
Well, you might get in the edit. We'll see. It
depends how frisky Anthony's
yes.
feeling.
I was just going to say, our podcast episodes probably very much reflect Anthony's mood while
They
editing.
wax and wane depend on, on that.
And I know he likes to take everything out about him, so he'll probably take that part out,
Right.
but leave in the China Grove. Whoa, China Grove part of it. Shall we hear from our sponsor?
Feels like the right time to bring in the sponsor break here. If you're like most men these days, you're probably asking yourself, how can I be a better feminist? I marched in D.C. back in 2017. I committed to the he for she global movement. I even shave my legs every day and wear high heels at home. What more should I be doing? It's time to get pregnant. That's the answer. Pillsbury Pregnancy Program for men. More about this. So it's a 10-month commitment. It comes with all the necessary elements of pregnancy. So first, the belly. There's a Pillsbury Pregnancy hoodie you kind of put on and wear.
Okay.
You cannot take it off. So it
Sure.
gradually gains mass over a 10-month period up to a 10-pound baby.
Okay.
Which is pretty large. Comes with electrodes that, like, through the sweatshirt, they attach to your abdomen and cause a lot of painful cramping.
Yeah. Okay.
Kind of like a smoking cessation patch that injects hormones into your body, causing wild mood swings.
Sure.
Need to nest. Start
Yeah.
getting the home ready.
Get the home ready. Yep. Or is it put like twigs in your living room? Twigs and like strips of newspaper.
No, it's not that. It's kind of the more domestic version of that. Also, once you're at full term, at just the time the electrode-induced contractions get super serious, they'll even send someone to your location to help deliver the final painful blow. So you could be, you don't know when this is going to happen. It's just going to happen. It's not over. Of course, you'll have months of recovery, as well as an erratic noise machine that's designed to force you out of bed in the middle of the night to console it. Kind of think of it as like a Roomba. You almost never know where it is or what time it's going to go off. Mm-hmm. So but
like the cheap Roombas.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
But in order to emulate the dreadful medical expenses, it's very pricey. So
Sure.
Of course, you don't actually know ahead of time how much it's going to cost. You just sign up and kind of get billed as you go. That's the Pillsbury Pregnancy Program.
Okay.
As far as I understand it, for men.
Yes.
For men.
Okay. So back to flexibility within a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the value in the planning itself, right? The Eisenhower quote, in preparing for battle, I found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. We've talked about being responsive and agile, not from a coding standpoint, but just like, agile in terms of when opportunities present themselves and when shit hits the fan.
To capitalize it, yeah, right. To capitalize and then also kind of retreat, when to retreat.
And I think it all kind of resolves itself into treating the strategy, and for us, again, like the document itself is the roadmap that we deliver to our clients. Treating that as a living document. So actually building in opportunities to review it, update it, assess it on a regular basis. Because I think one of the greatest failings you could make when going through the time and effort and money of putting together a strategy is then just to either let it sit in a corner or on a shelf somewhere, or just follow it blindly, or pass it on down and let your team follow it blindly. I mean, we kind of came at this from like, what if something happens? But now it's almost your responsibility to just be aware of what's happening around you, economic factors, product factors, growth factors, all those kinds of things. So I think one of my suggestions would be to build in, and I think this is a function of how fast your company and your industry is moving, but build in maybe quarterly check-ins, right?
Yeah.
Or at least annual check-ins. I don't think we have ever thought to deliver a video roadmap that is more than 12 months in length. So much changes in any company over 1 year. But if you're in a growth stage company, probably someone on your team should be assessing that roadmap once a quarter.
Right.
What has changed? Are our goals different, right? Are our products different? Have we just gotten a big fundraising round and it's changed some of our... Yeah. It's also important to note that the first idea isn't necessarily the best idea. Oftentimes, and we find this a lot with our clients, there's the work that you do to look inward and develop the goals and do all of that kind of diagnosis before prescribing the plan. But then there's also so much you learn by actually executing that plan and talking to customers and writing scripts and shooting and editing videos and putting them out there. And when we talk about the 7 phases, this is why that 7th phase analysis loops right back into the strategy, right? We have such an opportunity to learn so much from our video content in terms of what assumptions we were making early on, what we thought their journey was, and we can actually map that against what their actual behaviors are. That, again, I feel like it would be irresponsible to look at that and not make changes to the strategy. And so, just because the plan that was laid out when you put the roadmap together felt like it was the perfect plan doesn't mean that you're not going to have other experiences that say, I understand our customers better.
Right.
I understand our messaging better. Whatever it is. I mean, we, for the workshop, our first strategic engagement, we gave them their new tagline in writing a script for a kind of top of funnel piece for them. And they adopted that as the tagline for the whole brand. Right. And so all of a sudden that gave an additional perspective and an additional creative constraint to all the content that they were producing and what we were producing for them. So don't be afraid to, and this is something that I think I tend to at least default kind of struggle with. When I put a plan together, I feel like I've kind of thought of all of the options. And so this is the best way to do this. But
you had a limited knowledge when you made those decisions.
Yes. And so, set aside the pride of ownership and recognize, if anything, take pride in the awareness of what's changed. And say, you know what, I think we should make some changes here.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that was a very grown-up moment to recognize perhaps where you fault.
Well, I don't know that I'd say fault. And there goes the adult moment. I'm not going to... This personal revelation moment is later in the episode because I know my mom won't make it to here.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there are certain triggers you could go into your roadmap and say, we're going to get some investments later this year, or I know that our executive team is looking for another round of funding, whatever.
Or we're going to go international.
As soon as we get that money, we're going to go ahead and everybody's going to be fighting over the additional budget, but we've actually got a plan that we're ready to implement.
So much. That's so helpful for the client to know. Phase 2 looks like this, and so that let's say everything stays the same. Even next step is this. Just to be able to go in and say, here's our plan. Once this thing happens, puts your department or your initiative or whatever way above the rest.
Yeah, and
there's just way fewer question marks as to what's going to happen with that money.
And especially when it comes to fundraising rounds, there are so many growth targets that are associated with those investments.
Earmarked,
right? That you've got to, I'm going to invest. This group is going to invest $10 million in this company, and we expect this many customers by this date, this much revenue by this,
and you backtrack all that. We need to have this many SDRs and this many whatever.
And so a lot of it is, if you've got those plans in place, you get to be the executive who goes to the board first, saying, this is how I need to use this money. I'm going to do my job. Instead of responding to it. Right. Okay, I need to launch my phase 2. All right. What else?
I feel like kind of covered what we're looking for, are there any action steps you think that are like, let's say someone, there's no good or bad time necessarily to do the strategy. Is there a best time to create it? And like, should you wait until something or?
I think this is an unspoken rule for us, but like I just mentioned a few minutes ago, I don't think we've ever even imagined what laying out a roadmap that looks longer than a year would look like, because we know so much is going to change. I don't have anything other than that kind of anecdotal evidence. I wouldn't set out to set a defined strategy for more than about a year. You can certainly say then in year 2 we're going to do more mid-funnel content, and I mean you can be vague about it. So I think at least once a year, whether it's March 15th and that's when you finalized your strategy, every March 15th come back to it and say, okay, what do we know now? Or the end of the year is a fantastic time to assess it. Right, budgets are being set right before you have to make your budget proposals.
Right,
is a fantastic time to review it and make the tweaks and again be able to go to the board or the C-suite and say, here's my plan for video content and here's the budget that I need to do that. Whether it's taking in year 2 we were going to do more mid-level content and actually fleshing that out, knowing what that is and what kind of resources you need to execute that.
Let's say right now it's February when we're recording this. Should I wait until November to do this so that right before budget season I've got a plan?
For me, I think the philosophy is like buying a house. Best time to buy a house is now. If you sit around waiting for the perfect time, something's going to be off anyway. You're going to miss the right house. Rates aren't going to be perfect, whatever. Buying a house is a long-term investment. So the earlier you can get started in it, the better off you are, right?
Because if you create your strategy now and start executing some of that until Q4, and then you take a look at what you've learned and reassess.
Yeah, I'm going to spend $50,000 on video, and I'm going
to learn a lot
between now and October, and I'm going to figure out what I learned so that by the end of November I can say this is my plan for next year and ask for that in my budget meetings.
So I feel like so many people are looking at short term. How can I make Q3 or how can I make Q1 even look good? I don't have an answer for you. I can't come in from a video perspective. I can't come in and define.
If it's February 12th and you're asking me to help affect Q1 numbers, and you don't have some weird fiscal calendar where Q1 is like July,
right?
We probably should have started working on this Q2 last year,
right? Or whatever.
I mean, that in a nicer way. That's why I don't do the outreach.
But you can't. I mean, you can't be all that short term focused. You have to have a longer outlook on this. Even though things are changing, like we said in the beginning, you've got to have that plan for the long term, so that in short term you can prioritize things correctly and make the right decisions as you move forward.
Yeah,
you're in a much better position at the end of Q1. If you didn't hit your numbers, you're in a much better position if you know where you're going than if you can say, well, I fucked up.
True. And to that point, part of defining a strategy is defining what success is.
Right.
So when you go to execute phase 7, which is the analysis, you determined, what's a win, right? And so it's easier just to know. I mean, again, this kind of goes back to point 1. Putting the strategy together, part of that is defining success metrics, so that when you look at the numbers, you know what you're measuring them against. And so I guess my point is, without going through the strategic planning in the first place, you're never going to define success. And so once you have launched something, it's harder to tell whether it's working or not.
Yeah.
And the whole point is to say, this is the bar I'm going to set based on the information I have.
Yep.
Then we're going to execute this, and then we're going to look at, did we hit the bar that we set? And you can say, we didn't hit the bar that we set. And if you didn't, you can say, we didn't hit the bar that we set because we made the wrong type of content. Or you can say, it turns out our assumptions were wrong, and so we need to change our assumptions. Now we know that this is the right bar.
I'd feel way more comfortable walking into a board meeting, having failed, but knowing where I'm going.
Yeah.
Or here's how I failed, and here's what I learned, and here's what I'm going to do next.
Then I don't know what it did.
We just didn't hit it. That looks pretty fucking stupid.
Yeah. I mean, I can see going into a manager's meeting like that, but not a board meeting like that. And all of a sudden, they're like, why does this person work for us?
Yeah, right.
Okay. No, I think those are some good closing points. Let's hear very briefly from our sponsor once again.
Right. We got Pillsbury Pregnancy Program for Men. If you're like most men these days, you're probably asking yourself, how can I be a better feminist? I marched in D.C. back in 2017. I've committed to the he for she global movement. I even shave my legs every day and wear high heels at home. What more should I be doing? It's time to get pregnant. The Pillsbury Pregnancy Program for Men. I guess just Google it. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, Stella has indicated that she's ready to move on to something else. So that is our podcast episode for today. Thank you so much for listening, especially to the 100th minute mark that we're at right here. You know, rate, subscribe, all those kinds of things. Really, now it's more about, like, what do you want us to talk about? Right? Let's have a conversation here as a podcast community. What do you want us to talk about? My guess is we'll talk about that. Because we've got a whole...
I want to help solve people's problems.
We got a whole long list of topics we can talk about. But again, if it's not the kind of stuff that y'all want to hear, why should we even spend this time prepping and recording these? So let us know what you want us to talk about. We will answer you, and let's all learn.
All right, how about this? First person to give us a legitimate topic will give a $50 gift card to Amazon.
To Amazon. To visit the Amazon? $50 toward visiting the Amazon?
We'll take you $50 there. No, but I want some feedback. I'm also going to...
$50 is under our $100 threshold. So
that's right.
So you can give it to anybody.
You can do 99.
You can do 90. But it's going to be 50.
It's 50. Tell us what you want. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for...
So much.
We do love you.
From the bottom of my storyboard heart.
Cold, dark storyboard heart. Hey, Stella.
That kiss is probably just the best way to end it. That kiss is probably just the best way to end it.
Oh, I didn't hear your kiss.
I gave it a little.
Oh,
Stella kissing you?
Is Stella kissing my tongue? All right.
She must smell the hormones. Pregnancy thing.
No, I'm not. Sorry.
Well, you may not know.
I'm not pregnant. How dare you? I'm just big bone.
I feel like I don't bring Stella in too often, but it's usually on podcast day. Not really thinking ahead. She was really business today. She needed some extra love.
Oh God, I went over there. She just very passive aggressively was like,